From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. Hey everyone, just a quick note before starting today's show. If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to personally invite you to become a member of a budding community on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests, chat about things we've already heard, and gain access to some show swag. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. I'd love for you to join me. Okay, on with today's show. Today, I'm delighted to welcome a monumental figure in skydiving, Maxine Tate. Originating from the UK, Maxine's skydiving journey began during her university years when she made a tandem skydive to help support a charity while in London. She didn't make her next skydive until 15 years later while visiting New Zealand. She was so hooked that she ended up transitioning from a very successful corporate career in London to fully embracing the world of skydiving. Moving to Arizona, she trained under the esteemed Mark Kirkby of Arizona Airspeed fame at Skydive Arizona. Her progression led her to represent Australia at the 2008 World Meet in France. Additionally, her dedication saw her transitioning from competitor to instructor roles in the U.S., where she shared her expertise with budding skydivers. Later on, as the COO of Flight-1, she blended her business and skydiving skills to elevate the company to new levels. Her affiliations don't end there, as she's a proud member of the Highlight Pro Skydiving Team, and it should be mentioned that she's an 8-time world record holder in the discipline of speed skydiving. Whether training under legends, leading teams in world meets, or inspiring countless skydivers with her teaching and leadership, Maxine's mark on the sport is indelible. Welcome to the 20-Minute Call, Maxine Tate.
Oh, it's a delight to see your face and hear your voice, and thank you. I'm so very, very happy to be here today.
Maxine, thank you for giving me your time. What more could one ask for?
Dinner? I don't know. A drink?
Maxine, I want to start where almost like, rather than starting at the beginning, when I think about you, I think about someone that's living a life by design, as if you have cracked a code that so many of us are wishing to crack, right? When I observe you on social media, you're in Park City, Utah, skiing, or you're in this remote place or that. Can you share some insight of how you're living this very intentional lifestyle that so many are after?
I think you're assuming that I've met the goal. I'm not entirely sure that I have met the goal of being where I want to be yet. I think it is true to say it's a life by design. It's true to say that it's intentional. And I think it's because I constantly am asking myself the question of whether I'm happy doing what I'm doing in this moment in time. I think it's unrealistic to expect that you want to do the same thing with your life day in, day out, or even year in, year out. I probably check in with myself at least every year and say, is this still giving me the level of satisfaction that it has done in the previous years? And then being open to making changes and doing so with confidence. And I think that's where a lot of folks probably fall short of the idea of an intentional life, is that when they feel like they would like to make change, they don't necessarily take the step. And I think that comes down to having confidence that change is good. I don't think it's realistic to have a master plan that you stick to for years on years. I think Adam Grant talked a lot about this, who I'm a big fan of. You can't really have a master plan in an unpredictable world. All you can do is gauge what a meaningful path is for yourself. and react to the situation you find yourself in. So I think if I try to summarize what I've done in my life, is I've gone down a path which at that time felt exciting and fulfilling, led entirely by curiosity, which is a big theme in my life. And when I felt like I wanted to take a different path, I did. And I did so with confidence and without being concerned about whether that path was the right path or not. Just to follow it in terms of whatever happens, happens. And I'm excited for change and excited for new endeavors. And we'll see where it leads me.
That's very courageous, though. I don't hear you anchored to security as much as I'm curious. I will go in this direction. Like, not many people are living that way. I'm not living that way. Where do you get that confidence and ability to experiment almost without a fear of failure?
Well, you're right. I don't fear failure, because failure to me is not a negative thing. I think we try all sorts of things in our life. Wouldn't it be boring if we got it first time round? The whole point is to try something new, and some just like putting on a pair of jeans. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Try the next one. When you say security, I wonder what you mean by security. I mean, what does that mean I think it's different to different people. Like, I think when people say security, they're concerned about being able to put a roof over their heads and to be able to look after themselves. It's based in financial security, possibly. I've led several very different lives in this one body that I'm in right now, and I have utter confidence that I can work and earn money if I need to. The question is, am I doing it in something that's fulfilling? So I realize for most people that are in my profession of skydiving, they haven't necessarily had the same background as me. You talked about the idea that I've come from very different, like my origins are very different. I've had a whole career in the finance industry and media, and I have no doubt that if I wanted to move away from skydiving, I could still earn a good buck. And I really feel like money isn't the real commodity, time is. And I think that mindset that really values time more than anything else is what's led me down this journey of trying to lead a more intentional life.
Okay, security is this for me, is that I am doing a thing right now, and if the thing failed, I don't know that I have the self-confidence to go, well, I could go do the thing and earn that buck. It's more, I don't have that self-confidence. I think others around me might say, oh, you'll be okay. But in terms of the self-confidence, that self-voice to just know that I can pursue this, and if it doesn't work out, I can go back to this. I don't know if I went back to that I would even get a job. So I applaud you, because that self-confidence is something that I wish I had more of.
I feel like failure is a strange thing. I always wonder why people fear it. And I don't mean to minimize the way people do feel about it, but I think people get a sense of fear of failure in two different ways. One being being perceived as failing by the people around them. You know what I mean? Like a fear of being considered a failure by your peers. And that's one side of it. And then the other is seeing yourself as a failure. And if I was to try and, I like putting things in boxes, if you would try and look at those two particular boxes, for me personally, I try and be kind to myself in terms of my own self-confidence. Like, I understand that everything we do, learning isn't linear. If we go back to the concept of skydiving, rather than just a change in career, you can try something on, you start and you fail, and you try, you do a little bit more and you get a little bit better at it. You're never going to go into something and be perfect. Yeah. So I think most folks, when they try something new, they have a tendency to derail themselves when they don't have success right off the get-go. And I think that's where people really let their self-confidence wane, is because they don't recognize that learning isn't linear and it takes time. This is all about the work ethic, It doesn't matter whether it's a career or whether it's a skydiving discipline. You've got to put the work in and recognize that you're going to have your ups and downs, but it's the consistency is what really creates growth, For me, I don't really judge myself in that respect. When I fail, I'm like, okay, what do I learn from it? Let's apply that learning to my next attempt. And I really do use that across every aspect of my life. In terms of fear of failure in the eyes of others, I don't really care so much. To be honest, I don't care so much how others perceive my successes and my failures, because to me, the journey is far more important. And when I fail at something, I learn so much that I see it as wonderfully valuable, So I just have a different way of looking at the way that I walk through life, and whether I perceive it as a failure or a success. To me, I see benefit in both.
It's cliched, when people say, failure is actually a requirement in most anything to proceed. But many people are still fearful. So is this something that is learned through time, or have you always been this way with this perspective?
I think as I've got older, I've got less, my ego has got smaller and smaller. You know what I mean? I feel like this idea of fear of the being seen as a failure is very much egocentric. And that's a huge part of it. And to me, I don't think I have that ego as much anymore, that it doesn't really matter to me personally. So I don't know that I've always felt that this way, but I've always had the confidence, I think, to try new things. Did it hurt a little bit more when I so-called failed in my early life? Possibly, but I just really don't, it doesn't bother me so much anymore. So perhaps it's something that is degraded over time, if you like, that fear of failure in the eyes of others.
In your life, what would society or the outside, because your definition of failure is different, but what would you say that, could be deemed as a failure in your life that ended up being huge in your development?
Well, I think the concept that I left an incredibly established, lucrative career in London to go and jump out of planes. I think people probably thought that I was crazy at the time. And they can probably look back now. I know my friends that are, London centric, and the ones I've had for 30 plus years are super proud of everything that I've done in skydiving. They think it's insanely badass that one of their friends is a world champion, all that kind of stuff, and I love that they've supported me in that. But I have no doubt that folks thought I was crazy in the past to walk away from that career.
So this is a perfect segue, because if you're joining our podcast, you're probably wondering where the intro was. And I dived right into the thing that I admire most about you is just the way that you live your life. Let's take it back. So I know that you made your first jump, I believe at age 18, and then there was a huge gap before you made your second. So would you tell us what your first skydiving experience was like? And then secondly, what does this lucrative, incredible life that you were living before you decided to leave it all to go chase the dream?
Yes. I mean, I always felt like I wanted to try skydiving. I've always loved sports. I've been in competitive sports since I was 5 years old, believe it or not. And to me, my father was a Navy pilot, and it just seemed like a natural thing to do to try and jump out of planes. And this was back in the late 80s now in the UK. And the thing to do back then was to do a charity skydive. You earn the money to do it from sponsorship, and then you go jump out of a plane. And so I did this along with, there's lots of people in the industry that started this way as well. And it was in the UK, so of course the weather's dodgy, and it took me about, 7 or 8 times to go to the drop zone to finally get in the air. And back in those days, when you were doing a static line, it was on a military round parachute, and very, very different to the technology we have now. And, I got out at about 2,000 feet. I ended up in a bunch of line twists. I'm on this ridiculously large canopy that has zero steerability. I say zero. I mean, it has some, but very little, and no ability to be able to slow the descent rate. So I remember landing pretty hard, very close to a ditch, and I was like, oh, it was fun to jump out of a plane. I mean, I enjoyed that part of it, but good grief, I don't think I want to do that on a regular basis. It wasn't the greatest of experiences, at least, once you're out the plane. So I thought, no, I'm glad I've done that, check the box, but that wasn't really what I expected skydiving to be like. So onward and upward, moving on, and that's exactly what I did. So I continued with my life and started this career. I was a business consultant, and I'm the British equivalent of a CPA. I was working for a company called Arthur Andersen that doesn't exist anymore because of Enron, but it was one of the very top tier. And then I specialized in the media industry. So when I left Arthur Andersen as a business consultant, I became the head of finance and business affairs for a large production group of companies in Soho. And that was my career. And I was on the up and up. I was getting quite a name for myself. It was going really well. And I took a brief career break, which I recommend for anybody, went to New Zealand and was literally going past a drop zone in a bus and had a look over and saw someone making a tandem skydive. I'm like, ooh, look at that. That's what I thought it was all about. These nice big canopies that were steerable. I got off the bus. I went to the drop zone. I signed up immediately, did a tandem, landed on my feet, had all the wonderful experience of free fall. It was like, that was exactly what I thought skydiving was. But I didn't have that experience when I was 18 or 19. So I came back from that, 3-month break or whatever, came back to the UK, did my research, called up my buddy Alex and said, hey, do you want to learn to skydive? He's like, yeah, let's do it. That sounds fun. We got on a plane and went to Spain and got my AFF. And that was full of its ups and downs as well. That's a whole other story. But I finally got my license. And I'd say about a year later, I decided to quit my job and become a full-time skydiver. And it was that quick, which is insane in a way, to turn it around that quick. But I had got to the point in my career in London where I had to make a really big decision. We talk about those moments. I know this is something you talked about with some of your past folks on this podcast. I'd say probably the biggest moment where I had to make a decision to either go left or right, one of those really big, forks in the road, was when I came back from this trip and I'd learned to skydive and I'd probably got a year under my belt. I looked up in the local news. There was this very interesting job, a big job in media. And I was super curious again. And I didn't really have any intention of taking the job, but I went to the interview. And it was, I think I could probably say what it was. It was to be the chief operating officer in the London Film Council, which at the time was a huge funder in British film. And I got offered the job. And I remember thinking at the time, I either take this and my career is really solid and I'll go forward to do great things, whatever that means, or I recognize that this isn't actually something I want to do anymore and I want to take a different tack. And I think for me at the time, I was like, I love doing something and getting good at it and then moving on. And I had got to the point, I think, in my career where I was just not really loving the work anymore because it was so time consuming, James. You wouldn't believe the hours that I had to do, in any big job. And that's, I think, the point when I began to recognize that time was more important to me than money. And it happened to be at the same time in which I discovered skydiving and recognized that I don't particularly want this big corporate life anymore. What I really want is to have time doing the things that really light me up. And that involves being outside. I love travel. And I'm like, this is the time when I need to make a very big decision. And I chose time instead of money. And I chose skydiving instead of corporate life. I just quit basically and moved to Arizona. So there was that.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Burble. Between your first jump and not liking it on that charity jump and then making your next jump in New Zealand was 15 years. And then at roughly age 33 or 34, you're like, I choose time over the grind. Now, when I was 33, I'm conditioned, as is most of the world, to think about like we got to grind and work hard and 401k and retirement and security for the future, all those things. Now I'm in my mid-40s thinking, no, I've got that all wrong. Why were you at age 33, 34 have that level of awareness when so many others at that age, we're just trying to, we're just getting into stride? That's very mature at that age, yeah?
I don't know if mature is the word I would think about it. I think I felt like I didn't need to have more than I already had. I think it's that moment where you find gratitude, isn't it? Where I'm just, I was pretty secure in my life. I felt like I could do great things in other areas and it wasn't going to impinge my financial security. And even if it did, I have the resources to be able to fend for myself. There's certain careers that are always going to have work. And if you are a finance professional, you're going to be good. You know what I mean? I can run a business. I can do accounting for a business if I even wanted to. I've been a consultant for 15 years. I can work if I need to. So I've always got something, I think, to fall back on. And I think giving myself that sort of security from a career point of view meant that I could make what could be considered bold and brave choices that didn't feel quite so bold and brave to me, because, I'm a hustler. I can hustle. I can make things work. I've been working since I was 14 years old and financially independent. I know how to hustle if I had to. So I chose me and I chose time, knowing that I could always fall back on that if I needed to.
Before we proceed further into the future now, I don't want to depart. Firstly, my parents, who are not skydivers, listen to this podcast, maybe the biggest fans, and my family being British, would love to know, where in England are you actually from?
Oh, yeah. I was born in a seaside city or town called Brighton, which is very well known for its history and what have you. And then I moved to London at the age of 18 to go to university, and I studied at the London School of Economics. And then I worked in London for a solid 10, 15 plus years after that. So I'm a Southerner, but I consider myself a Londoner, which is also a Southerner. The
London School of Economics, so ho-hum. Kind of a big deal there, Maxine.
Well, it's quite funny because I actually, when I applied I didn't want to go to, the big names, Oxford, Cambridge. I felt like that I just basically had all the London university. I just want to go to London. I was an 18-year-old. I'm like, send me to London, people. I want to go have some fun. And so, yeah, I ended up in London, and LSE was a great place to study too. It's a really international university, and I love the diversity of London and the diversity of that college too.
So when you decide that you're going to break away, all your family and friends think you're completely insane, I imagine?
I don't know. I mean, I think my path is just different from theirs. I think a lot of it comes down to, I also at that time, I didn't have a family, I didn't have kids or something. I always have to recognize the fact that the choices that I make I don't have the dependence that a lot of my friends have too. And I want to acknowledge that, because I think it's a bold and brave choice for their own to have kids and to do the grind to provide for their family. I admire that. I really do. But that's not my path. And so my path would look bold and brave to other people, but I see it in aspects of other people's lives too.
Pardon the term, but you do cut away and you go to Skydive Arizona and you sort of meet up with Mark Kirkby of why Arizona? How was Mark on your radar? Why there versus anywhere else?
I wanted to learn to be an inside center. At the time, I had been on a 4-way team in the UK before I quit my job and moved. And I wanted to learn that slot. And Mark Kirkby is and was the best tail in the world. So I went to learn from him. And that man threw me around the tunnel like you wouldn't believe.
Extraordinary.
And then, so I was there probably for about 6 months, just learning from Mark, and then moved to Australia, where a friend of mine was living. And I thought I would, at that point, I'm like, right, what am I going to do with my life? I moved to Australia, stayed with my dear friend, Nicola, in Sydney, and ended up on the Australian 8-way team, and then came back to North Carolina to train with Kirk Verner. So Kirk was my 8-way coach. At that point, didn't really have any direction as to where I was going to live, Jameson. And that was, to me, I was trying everything on for size. So Australia was a beautiful country, but it was just a long way from everything. And I was really into skydiving at the time. I'm like, I need to be in the US. So I up and moved again for my third continent living and moved to the US and ended up working for Flight-1 in DeLand. So, and that was really in terms of an intentional life, I think what I was looking for during that time is how to combine my skills in business with my love of skydiving. And I'd done the business thing, I'd done the skydiving thing, but I hadn't managed to combine them to be able to really be the best me and get the most out of my life in that sort of like perfect combination. And joining Flight-1 as their chief operating officer was really the combination I've been looking for. And I found it in DeLand with the guys.
How did you get connected with Flight-1? What was the intro there?
It's one of these things, when one door closes, a million open, right? So because I was in Arizona, a dear friend of mine, Annalise Peterson, was dating Shannon at the time, actually. And Shannon Pilcher, that is, who you had a wonderful interview with a few weeks ago. And Shannon Flight-1 had been going for probably about four years at that point, but they were looking for a business professional. Shannon, Ian, and the rest of the guys are super, super smart, but they don't have that business background. They're mostly engineers. And although they had all the ideas and what have you, they didn't know how to structure it in a business that could organically grow in a really proficient manner. And they were looking for someone to take that on. And Annie introduced me to Shannon while I was in Arizona working with Mark, and we forged that bond. And then I flew to DeLand to interview with the rest of the team. I say the team, the rest of the owners. So Bobo and Jay, and then I spoke to Jonathan Tagle on the phone. And that's how it was just a mutual connection. Gotta love that.
This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. As I think you know, I had an interview with both Shannon, of course, and Scott Miller, where it sort of all begins in the early days. For those that are listening that are not familiar with Flight-1, Flight-1 is now the Harvard University of canopy piloting for military and civilian. But it never used to be that way. And I remember, Maxine, seeing the infrastructure of the coursework where it started with what was essential skills and advanced skills, then become more classroom, university type, sort of class 101, 102, 201, et cetera, et cetera. How much of that infrastructure or development were you involved with?
Well, that idea, it's interesting that you set it up that way. Scott's such a wonderful human being. I'm so glad I got an opportunity to meet him when he came to DeLand on our 10 or 15 year anniversary, whatever it was. The idea of the sort of university curriculum was really Ian and Shannon's. They wanted to create an end-to-end solution that brought Scott's essential skills course together with their high-performance canopy piloting. And they wanted to create pathways for people to follow, and really emphasizing the fact that canopy piloting is a continued education. It's not just something you do when you learn AFF and then move on, So this university structure, this sort of beehive, if you like, of curriculum was really their vision, more than anything else. So when I came on board, we were just redoing the curriculum and moving on from the essentials and the advanced into something far more detailed, and really blowing it out to something that was comprehensive from the very start of your skydiving career onward, all the way through to high performance and flocking and any other aspect of canopy piloting you might choose to pursue,
Will you take me behind the scenes a little bit with that, Maxine? Because most of us know Flight-1 and the brand that it is and how enormous that team is now. And I always knew Maxine, COO of Flight-1. No clue what that job actually looks like. What did you do? Would you mind taking me behind the scenes with that and keeping all these engineering dudes in line?
It certainly had its challenges. When you have so many extremely bright people and so many ideas, being on a fly in the wall at any of the forums would be quite an interesting seat to have. When I first arrived, they didn't have an accountant. Well, they had an accountant that was doing all of the external work, but they didn't really have any visibility of their finances outside of just the numbers back from bank statements and what have you. So as the British equivalent of a CPI, I basically took over all of the finance work for the company for the entire 10 years and I was there. And that was a great tool as a small business that grows to really have complete visibility of the financial health or growth of the company. And that gave us the structure and the ideas we needed to be able to move forward and to grow the company into something much bigger like it is now. When I joined, we had the 5 owners and we had a few of the members of Slipstream. Now, Slipstream is, the name of the people, maybe more than that, the name of the team, but that's my sister Kaz Shiki and Justin Thornton and Brian McNenny and a few other people. We were only about 9 or 10 people at that point. And then the factory team expanded. So we had Pablo Hernandez and Brian Vasher and Drennan, Jessica, a few others like that, Tommy Delaback. So we only were about 10 people at that point. It's pretty small. And we wanted to take this expanding curriculum and be able to put it into more drop zones all over the world. So when we started to bring more people on, we were taking this uniform curriculum and putting it in the hands of the movers and the shakers in all the different countries around the world. And the idea being, if we create this uniform curriculum taught by different members of Flight-1, that you could literally go from one instructor to another and continue the same education with the same material and never have to take a step backwards. And that's really where this came from. The idea that we want to encourage people to learning and to continued learning anywhere in the world. My job originally was definitely pulling the finances together. And then as the chief operating officer, just really taking the amazing ideas of the internal team and the executive management team and making it happen, which is what a chief operating officer does. I'm the one that create the logistics and actually deliver the ideas into reality. It's a big job. It's a really big job.
Yeah. It's scaled enormously, well past the 10. And what I'm thinking about is, in the 10 and a half years that I've been running my business, you're grinding and the wins are, slowly tick, tick, tick. And you might have a big victory for us, might be landing a significantly sized client or someone that we've really been wanting to work with. In the scope of Flight-1, can you describe like a major victory that moved that company forward from where it was?
Oh, yeah. In a word, military. There's no doubt that the bedrock of Flight-1 is our military department. And for those that don't know so much about that part of Flight-1, it was, and that was back in the early days as well. There was a time when the military operators, mostly special forces, looked to the civilian world to find who the best of the best were in every area that they wanted to train, and they wanted to work with those civilians because they knew that they were the best in class, right? So, for example, if they wanted to go learn how to drive in extreme conditions, they would go find a rally, the world champion rally driver. You know what I mean? They wanted to get the best free fall. They went to Arizona Arsenal. They wanted to learn more about canopy piloting. They came to Flight-1. And so that's that gateway that when they opened the door and allowed us to come in and share what we do with them and create a curriculum which is specific to their military command with their own SOPs, and to work with them in close proximity, flying stacks into unknown terrain, in adverse conditions and what have you. That's where we got to take what we had done in the past and apply it to a very real life situation. And we've developed that side of the business year by year, making sure that we're still doing the very best, and they demand the best, which has been great because it's really pushed us to deliver exactly what they need. And that is such a huge part of our business. It's a part that the instructors dearly love to perform. And the camaraderie that exists in the company, in the folks that deliver that military training, is bar none. And it's with purpose, James, and that's what a lot of this comes down to. I love the fact, at least from a sort of COO and owner status, that we have skydivers that join Flight-1. They don't have to throw drogues anymore. They find purpose in their work, and they deliver an extraordinary product to extraordinary people. And that is immense. I mean, I find that deeply satisfying.
Maxine, I am an outsider, like many people will be listening, in terms of special forces, right? I'm fascinated as a person, as a kid, I had all the GI Joes. I am fascinated by special operations and that world. And obviously I know some of these people in skydiving, but I daren't ask them. Like, I don't ask Chris Wagner, what do you do? What does that look like? But you working with these special teams and these special people, is there anything about these groups of people that have surprised you that aren't necessarily the stereotype of, they are the tip of the spear in expertise and moving forward first when there's problems in the world? But is there something that you're like, wow, I admire XYZ, or an experience that you've had, or a story that paints a picture of that category of person?
Well, I don't personally, I'm not personally a military instructor. I actually specialize in sport, but obviously have been around a fair few of them a lot. And I would say, just from my personal perspective, what really blows my mind is that they're experts in becoming experts. You can literally, they're the best students because you tell them to do something and they trust you and they go out and they do it first time. They do it with confidence. We're back to that idea again. They do it without fear and they do it with confidence. And they're like, you're the best. You tell us what we need to do, and they go and they deliver it. And that's why they are just extraordinary in their learning curve, is because they commit to what they're being told to do. And they're just extraordinary problem solvers from that perspective. I'm sure other members of our military cadre could give you a greater insight, but I think that's what I take away from the folks that I've had the privilege of spending time with.
You said you were with Flight-1 for how many years? Well,
I'm still with Flight-1, but as the chief operating officer, that was 2010 to 2019, so 10 years. I'm still an instructor and one of the owners. But I'm mostly, and I just do mostly sport work now, which I dearly love.
I don't want to overlook that. You said you're still an instructor and one of the owners.
Yes.
Yeah, I hadn't realized that.
It's a company which I'm very invested in and was heavily involved in for 10 years, and that was something which I'm very proud of. Myself and Brian Vasher became owners in, I think it was 2015 or something like that.
So why did you elect to step down from your role as COO?
I retired, James, at the age of 50. That's genuinely retired from my corporate life. It's so funny. We ended up, we were interviewing someone for a really pivotal role in the company, and he decided not to join us. And his comment was, I'm in a position right now where I can get to 50 and retire. And I was 49 at the time. And I'm like, oh, is that a thing? I need to think about that. Like maybe this is the next step for me. And I gave it a lot of thought. I mean, again, am I happy what I'm doing? Is there something else there I want to do? And for me personally, in my corporate career, the most satisfying part of it is growing small businesses. That's something that I've always specialized in, mostly because I have a multiple different skill sets. So legal, business affairs, finance, operations, So when I'm doing everything, I love that. I love being the one in charge and doing a little bit of everything and getting to the point where it's like, okay, we've grown to the point now where we need to bring more people in and start to carve off the pieces of responsibility. Like we had a sport manager, we've got a military manager who's a rock star. Brought on someone to manage the PD factory team, like starting to hive off the parts of my role to allow the company to grow. And then I'm like, you know what? I think that's it. I'm at the point where it's less satisfying for me to try and run a bigger business. I'm ready to pass the mic. And I love passing the mic, especially when it came to the corporate world. So I was ready to move aside and start new adventures, Pivot number 2 or 3, I guess.
So you stepped down as COO, and I want to say at some point, not far off after that, you decide you want to get into speed skydiving. Is that right?
Yes, it was. I think so. I gave up I stepped down in the beginning of 2019, and then I competed in speed skydiving in October of 2019. And yeah, that journey has been super interesting. I think you might find this interesting, why I ended up doing that too. Again, I'd retired from swooping. I was competed on the British team for about 6 years as a pro canopy pilot, and I definitely wanted to knock that on the head, but I still kind of wanted to compete in something, and I love learning. And so I competed in an 8-wave for Australia. So I'd done a flat discipline. I competed for the UK as a canopy pilot, so I'd done a canopy one, but I'd never done any vertical skydiving. And when I say I'd never done any vertical skydiving, I mean it. Like, I'm a very mediocre sit flyer, and that's it. Really never flown on my head, but I love to go fast, right? So I thought, let's try speed skydiving and see if that works. And I rocked up at nationals. I laugh now. I rocked up at nationals in Paraclete. Actually, speed skydiving nationals is going on at Paraclete right now, ironically. And so this is back in 2019, and I had a go, and I was like super unstable because I really hadn't flown on my head much. So I was like, I think I need to fly in a booty suit. And for anyone who's not a skydiver, basically people who fly on their bellies, who've got these really big suits with big sort of leg wings, if you like, and grippers and all sorts of things. Very unaerodynamic, shall we say. But I knew how to fly that like, the back of my hand. And I competed in speed skydiving in my booty suit. And I almost broke the world record, ironically, in that, because it's just my level of familiarity and also my complete commitment to going as fast as I possibly can. Speed skydiving is a mindset game. You have to completely commit to going as fast as you possibly can with no half sends allowed. You know what I mean? And that's my mindset. So I was into it. I managed to get a place on the US team in my booty suit, go figure. And this is where the project started. I'm like, okay, I have an opportunity to try something very different. I wonder, curiosity coming in again, I wonder how far I can get if I trained my ass off for a year. For one season, could I actually get to world level in 1 year? What does that even look like? Is it possible? I wonder if anyone would like to follow that journey. I would love to try and challenge myself to learn that much in such a short space of time and see what happens. And that's what I did. I gave myself one season to try and learn how to go as fast as possible on my head and then go to the World Championships. And I started to blog it. And it was the most extraordinary thing to do because, man, I had great days and I had bad days. Like I said, the learning curve was never linear. And I had moments where I'm like, I think I might suck at this, but maybe I'll be okay. I don't know, but just kept going, trusting the learning process. And then COVID hit. So my intention of it being a 6-month project then became a year and a half because the World Championships got delayed for another year. And I was like, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's do it. And so I trained for 2 seasons. I think I did about 500 jumps, trying to figure it out on my own pretty much. And then ended up going to the World Championships in Russia, in Siberia, in the middle of a pandemic. That was a whole other thing too, but what a journey. So I basically spent a year and a half training something I'd never done before because I wanted to see just what was possible.
Walk me through a speed skydive, Maxine.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how is it remarkably different? Obviously, it's different than belly, but even say, VFS flying on your head.
Yeah, so speed skydiving is probably one of the most straightforward in terms of the goal. It's just go as fast as you possibly can in terms of vertical speed. The one that goes the fastest wins. And you basically exit the plane between 13 and 14,000 feet. You wear a speed measuring device on your helmet. You go out, you go into a head down dive. And then when you get to about 5,500 feet, you have to pull out of that dive, off jump run, and then deploy. Now, that sounds pretty straightforward, but it's a little it can be gnarly for sure. Ultimately, it's a very quick skydive. If you're going quite fast, that free fall is only about 30 seconds, 25, 30 seconds possibly, compared to what's normally a minute, And it's really hard to maintain that position as well. If you come out the plane, you get into a head down dive or close to it. As you start to accelerate, you start to get wobbles. They call them speed wobbles, And ironically, you need to almost relax through it to try and get through that barrier to get to a point where you're nice and smooth after. Coming out of that dive can be pretty physical to actually flare out and try and slow your body down so you get to a speed which is safe to deploy your parachute. And you can normally get down to similar speeds that we would do on a normal belly jump. It's no different really from VFS. You said VFS, if people are on their heads. For anyone that's not familiar, that's vertical formation skydiving. And, you flare out and you decelerate, and all of that vertical speed that you've created creates a lot of horizontal lift, So it's a lot on the body. I'm not going to lie. I thought I gave up swooping because that was really hard on the body, and I just tried this new thing, and it was a lot on the body too. Speed skydiving takes it out of you a lot. Kind of going at 280 plus miles an hour by the end of that dive, and it's a lot. But boy, it's fun.
You set a world record.
I'd set 8 world records actually. But and then we went to Russia, and we had the most incredible time there. I'd have to say, myself and my teammate Kyle Lopres, we both won the gold medal, and then the US won the team gold medal as well. So I say that it was never the goal, James, and honestly, it's like the icing on the cake, but it wasn't the reason why I did it. We talk about trust the journey. I'll use my wonderful teammate Mel's podcast at Trust the Journey. To me, and before I went into this project, I sat down with her and had a conversation with her. I only wanted to do this project if I felt there was something that I was gonna get out of it, regardless of the result. The result isn't something I can control. I control my performance, but I can't control the result because I can't control who's there and who performs as well. All I can do is go in and do my best, right? And all I wanted to do was to learn what I'm capable of by putting myself in this really intense training environment. As it happened, it ended up with a world championship and a gold and a bunch of records.
Don't you think, though, Maxine, that this is, if you're a sports psychologist, this is it in a nutshell in terms of high-performing athletes? Like, as a former competitor in golf at a reasonably high level, if you think end result, you will never get there. You will not get the result that you want. In business, I often think, I don't want to focus on money. I want to think about advocating for my clients. And if I do right by them, money takes care of itself. In other words, we're not what you've just described, saying, I wasn't ever thinking about becoming a world champion. I wasn't ever thinking about breaking world records, but I did. And it makes me think, well, it's because you weren't thinking about those things is exactly why you accomplished those things. Is there something to that mental psyche for you that you agree with?
I think in business, yes. And I really connect with what you said there. It's like, if you go in, I want to make money. Yeah, good luck with that. If you want to create something special, that's more likely to give you the result of a good bottom line. You know what I mean? If you put something out there in the world which people desperately want to be a part of for all the right reasons, that's going to give you the result you're looking for. Don't get me wrong, as a competitor, everybody wants to win. Of course they want to win, but for me, it's never been the driving force behind why I do it. I mean, you think about it, if you dedicate your life to train for something and eventually you end up with the silver, what does that feel like if the only thing that mattered to you was the gold? I just don't even know I don't even comprehend what that must be like. It doesn't mean I don't want to win. It doesn't mean that I don't want to stand at the top of the podium. But I see the value in the journey just as much, not just as much, more so for me personally than standing on the podium at the end. You know what I mean?
The benefit of me doing this podcast and speaking to high achievers is I'm starting to notice a red thread that seems to be connective from all these high achievers. Craig Girard, the most decorated skydiver in the history of formation skydiving, as I know it, said the exact same thing. It's the journey. It's the joy of competing. It's the learning that you get out of the challenges that are faced. I hear you saying it's just me being me with my mindset, but this mindset is connected to many other high achievers that I've spoken with. It's very interesting.
The way I question myself and what I do is not what do I want to do, it's like who do I want to be? And I feel like being more connected with identity and experiences and what that does for me in terms of myself and my personality and my core values is more important to me than what's written on a piece of paper, achievements.
So who do you want to be today?
That's a question I'm still asking myself. I definitely feel like I'm being pulled towards activities that give myself a deep sense of satisfaction. So like Highlight is a really good example where, we get to use skydiving as a metaphor for putting messages out into the world to lead a bold, brave life of our own design. I feel like I'm living that in reality. And now I get a chance to share it through something which I deeply love and I'm very passionate about. Who I want to be is I want to be able to share what's worked for me and to encourage others to lead a life that pushes them in a way that they are challenged but also satisfied with. And there are a number of ways I can do that, and I'm trying to explore all of them right now.
It's a great segue. You mentioned Highlight Pro Skydiving Team, which, for those that don't know, is a exhibition skydiving team, usually with a message. I don't know if the right word is usually, has a message that is jumping into very high-profile events. And I think incredibly inspiring and very positive for both the sport and also exposure to the sport and with a message. Would you share with me, how is it that you got onto that team? What was the genesis of that?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. It started at a time when the centenary of the 19th Amendment was upcoming. So the amendment that gave women the right to vote, or at least some women, and the black people of color and women of color didn't get the right to vote until the Voting Rights Act in 1965, but got to start somewhere, right? And it was a huge pivotal moment in women's suffrage and our ability to be able to have a seat at the table. So the Women's Skydiving Network wanted to find a way to celebrate that important centenary and wanted to put together a demo team of all women to commemorate the centenary. And so Amy Shimlecki and Melanie Curtis, the co-founders of Highlight Pro Skydiving Team, put the message out there to try and find other women with the right qualifications and personality, et cetera, to put together this sort of A team to be able to go out there and not only represent in terms of skydiving, but also to represent in terms of mission, to reach out beyond skydiving to the general public and encourage them to use their voice and use their vote, and to commemorate those who have come before us, And so I was lucky enough to get a call up, and I remember so clearly the first time we all got together, because I remember walking into it was a conference room in Skydive, Arizona. I mean, the list of these women are people I've admired for years, and some of which I know dearly, very well. But we all walked into this conference room and we all sat around the table, and there was almost like this lull, a moment where we all look at each other, everyone saying, gosh, holy crap, look at all these people around the table. Do we really belong here? Everyone's got their own little mini imposter syndrome moment. The last 3 or 4 years that we've been together has just been a masterclass in what's possible if you take a group of extremely motivated individuals with zero ego and mission driven, and to see what's possible if they come together and create a productive environment where anything is possible. It's been one of my absolute highlights in skydiving to be a part of this team, and I'm so excited for it.
The makeup of the team, of the individuals, is extraordinary. I mean, it is a mini Hall of Fame of the best. But you know what we've learned, and maybe I can just share this because I just mentioned imposter syndrome, and it's so funny because every time I've heard one of my teammates, even Kerry said it, holy crap, like we look at Kerry like she's the rock star, you know what I'm saying? And she said she had imposter syndrome. But I want to just mention something about it, because one of the things that I've worked on as a work in progress myself is not having imposter syndrome and recognizing what you bring to the table. And I think over the last 3 or 4 years that we've been together, what's become blatantly obvious to me is that each of us brings something very special to the table. And it's the combination of those skill sets and the willingness to share and to listen and learn from each other that creates something which is far, far greater than the sum of its parts. And I think being in this team has taught me, or it's giving me the opportunity to learn how to own what I do well
I remember, I think it was in a podcast I heard recently, vulnerability is being able to admit that you're good at something. And that's something which especially women are not good at. It's very hard to say, I do this really, really well, because it feels uncomfortable, right? When people hear that, it feels uncomfortable when someone says that. But you can do so with confident humility and bring that to the table, and it's powerful. So being in Highlight has definitely taught me where my unique value comes and how I can share it and how much I can learn from the people around me, and to be comfortable having a seat at a table surrounded by extraordinary individuals and being okay with it.
If we look at the breadth of your life, right, to this point, and we take a step back and we just sort of look at it from 10,000 feet, let's say. It's a lot of wisdom there. Let's say that there is a younger jumper, or even let's start with jumping, and then let's talk about business. For those that have aspirations but self-doubt, what advice do you give?
The advice I give is not in this form of advice, it's in a question. What are you fearful of? You say self-doubt, like what is that? Where is that doubt coming from, that you're not going to succeed? Is it, to me, getting to the root of what causes a lack of confidence is very empowering. I don't have advice. I just listen. I want to listen more. I want to get to the root cause of it. And I think anyone who's a mentor or a coach for that will understand, if you don't get to the root cause of what's causing someone to hold themselves back, then you're not necessarily going to make a change to it. So I'm turning your question upside down a little bit. The advice is to ask yourself what it is that you're worried about, and to truly ask yourself if that's a real fear or not. What's the worst that could happen? You fail. Okay. Try again. Like at the end of the day, understanding that learning process. And we all start fearful. We generally start scared when we're outside our comfort zone. Right? I'm not without fear, but I do it. And then the fear subsides a little bit, and I do it for a second time. Still fearful. Getting up and doing it again and again, failing and doing it again and again. That repetition is what breeds familiarity and consistency. Now we start to get beyond the comfort zone if we're doing it enough that it's something that you're familiar with. I think my advice is to question yourself as to what you feel is actually holding yourself back.
Great point. Anyone with an aspiration really of what they want to achieve. Let's move this to business, because you have such business acumen. And many of the listeners of this podcast are entrepreneurs themselves. And as entrepreneurship is risky and it brings about fear. What advice, if any, from your business experience do you feel is essential for business growth?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it comes back to the idea of where you want to take your business. If your business is bottom line driven, then yeah, be fearful. I mean, in this environment, this day and age, it's tough to make money for sure, But if your business goals are formed in terms of making sure you follow the core values of who you are and who your business is, and knowing why you're doing it, that to me is the crux of everything. You have to know why you're doing it and keep pushing forward with your business core values, and see that as being the success. And I truly believe that the money comes after that. That said, I know how hard it is as a business owner or someone who manages a business. You're fearful that you can continue to employ your people, look after them, and your clients. I get that, and especially in the sort of somewhat unstable world that we live in, where we have to keep pivoting. Love that word, to pivot, right? We have to keep doing that. But knowing that if you're putting the right services out there and people love what you do, then they're going to be there for you. And you just have to move forward with that sense of confidence that you're delivering, not necessarily money-wise, but you're delivering the reason why you started out in the first place. Go back to the basics,
Love that. Let's talk about, again, looking at your career now on the skydiving front, where you are talking about, you are following the essence of getting the most out of time and enjoyment in life, or feeling fulfilled. You have traveled to so many countries. You have jumped at so many drop zones. You've had so many unique experiences. You've met some of the most extraordinary people. Can you share one or two really fulfilling aspects of this journey you've been on since you decided to be a full-time skydiver?
Yeah, gosh, I'm so grateful for the experiences that I've had. It's so funny because I'm somewhat of an introvert. I'm definitely an introvert, and I definitely do things on my own a lot. But I feel like this idea of if you want to go fast, walk alone, but if you want to go far, walk together. I've heard that a fair few times over the last few years, and I find myself now, having competed in a number of individual disciplines, realizing that it's so funny. It's almost literal, isn't it? Go fast. I mean, gosh, I've gone fast on my own so many times. But I find now that the things that are really giving me the most satisfaction is bringing what I have to a group environment and doing something with it. And so Highlight for sure is one of the most satisfying and special moments. I'll share one of those where it's where you can really connect with other people through what you do is really very special. Someone else that was on the podcast might well have mentioned this, but we had this extraordinary experience in North Carolina where we were jumping into a women's soccer match, and we were there to celebrate Pride. And I got to jump a large rainbow flag into the stadium, which has been one of my goals, that being able to deliver that message as an ally. And then a storm hit. And as soon as we landed, and then the storm hit, and they had to evacuate the stadium, and everybody poured outside, and we were there with all of our equipment, and we had this extraordinary, overwhelming love coming from everybody there. And we ended up talking to everybody for probably about half an hour to an hour, and just really connecting with families and kids, and it was such a special moment. And our teammate Leah Levy took all the pictures, and when she sent the pictures through, I was literally crying, because there was something so magical about the connections that we made that night that reached well beyond our sport. You know what I mean? So I think it's the difference between connection and communication. Like, to me, that was a moment of connectivity that I will never forget. And it's not just what I've done in recent years that I'm beginning to realize how important that working with others and sharing those experiences are. If I look back in my history, like past history in skydiving, and I try and think about one of the most satisfying and incredible moments, is actually from 2009, Jump for the Cause, which for anyone who's not a skydiver, it was an all-women's event where we raised money for breast cancer. We raised over $1 million, and then we tried to break the formation skydiving all-female record. And it was one of the toughest events I've ever been to. It was 105 degrees in Paris. We only just got it. We had to work so hard for it, but the camaraderie of that event and actually achieving the goal at the end. I was one of the plane captains, and it was just monumental achievement to break the record and raise $1 million. And I still think it's one of my proudest, most enjoyable moments in skydiving from back in the day.
I'll put that video in the show notes. I recall, when I think about it, I think of the celebration and watching that, because you could feel it. You could feel the joy, and that camaraderie really came through. I feel, Maxine, when you have been on your journey, because it's following not the financial or the grind, but rather checking in with self. Is this still fulfilling me? Yes, no. If it is, I carry on. If it's not, then I sit back. This is my interpretation. And I sit back and I think, okay, what will fulfill me next? How often do you check in with yourself to say, am I happy?
Regularly. I'll quantify that better. I checked in a little less with myself when I had a corporate job. And I feel like there will be people out there that will listen to this and relate to the idea that, you know, you pick up a position and you get into the grind of it, and any new position, you have to work your butt off when it starts, and suddenly it's 5 years on and you haven't stopped and asked yourself whether this is still what you want to do, you know, and that's the grind of corporate work. But for me now, and as a skydiver, I actually ask myself probably a good fair few times a year even, what do I want to do, especially since I've, you know, quotes, retired from my corporate life and I'm just skydiving and enjoying those moments more. I have more time, and so I have more time to consider it. And I think I'd say in the last couple of years, especially since I've actually retired from competitive skydiving, I ask myself, probably every couple of months, like about what direction I want to be in, like where do I want to live, what I want to be doing with my time. Is there a project out there that I feel is going to help me deliver my own core values to myself? Like all the time. I mean, literally every few months. I just spent the summer up in PNW asking myself if I want to live in Washington. And now I'm actually back in Utah right now asking myself, where do I want to spend winter and how do I want to spend my time, and realizing actually that I love coaching and I love being a mentor because I get the opportunity to visit drop zones and spend time with people. And I love that interaction, just because I still have a love and a passion for the sport. And that's still a very important part of what I do. I enjoy it. I hope other people enjoy it. And so, yeah, a lot more now, especially the last few years.
When are you happiest?
When I'm hiking up a mountain.
Which you do a lot.
I know you see it from the pictures, but this is why, like I said, I'm an introvert, and an introvert doesn't necessarily mean I don't like being around people. I think that's very misunderstood. I think there's some wonderful work by a lady called Susan Cain, and she says that being an introvert is a superpower. And I think this is what a lot of folks don't know about me, is I have a very big lateral thinking ability. Like I'm a very creative thinker. That's why, in fact, it's worked really well for me in business as a COO. But I have, when introverts or someone who's a creative thinker creates time on their own space, they can do a lot of this sort of background thinking out the box. So for me, when I'm questioning what do I want to do right now, or what opportunities lie ahead, I'll hike up a mountain and I'll start to see the clarity of what's out there, and I'll start to make the connections. And that's when I think my brain really fires up. And I never, ever listen to music. I never wear earphones. I'm just in the moment. And I never stress it. Like if I don't know what my next direction is, I'll go hiking for a few days and it comes to me because I've put myself in a creative space where my mind can wander.
I've mentioned this on previous episodes of this, that for me, I'm not to that degree, but I find that to be a business owner, because there's a daily grind and you can become subjective, that the need to get away from my business to have perspective brings clarity and almost this reinvigoration of energy, because I love to create, but I can't create in the grind. I've got to get away. And what you just said really resonated with me. A little bit of solitude to think.
Yeah. I think it's quite common. You'll find some business, whether it's CEOs or owners or what have you, will schedule time to pull away from it, pull away from the business a little bit. And whether it's a couple of hours every week or whatever, take themselves somewhere else and allow that time to be able to, what do they say? It's the 10th, well, like you said, it's the 10,000 foot view. You need to take a moment where you can see the wood for the trees, if we're going to go down all the metaphors, you know what I mean? You've got to be able to allow that think time in the space. And sometimes that time is not even thinking, it's just quietening everything down and then opening the door to creative thinking.
Who have been key mentors for you in your journey, or folks you look up to?
All my peers, honestly. I mean, I feel I'm definitely the kind of person who likes to surround herself with other people who are more talented and more knowledgeable than I am. I think I've said this before. I'm like a sponge. I love learning, and I'm very good at applying learning to every aspect of my life. So I love to surround myself with people who I think are going to help me on that journey. And I have, whether it's all the guys and girls at Flight-1 or my teammates at Highlight, they all inspire me. The people that I have in my life every day inspire me. And that's, again, by design. As
we close, and for those that are listening, if you have a message that you would want to say, I want you to know this, or something, a message on your heart from all of your experiences, you want people to know, if you have one, what is that? That
you are far more capable than you think you are. And as you try and explore that, be kind to yourself and realize that there will be ups and downs, but stick with it if you want to really see what you're capable of. Be a little bit kinder to yourself, I would say.
Be a little bit kinder to yourself. Amen, amen. That hits. Maxine, thank you for being so generous with your time. We've been friends for some time, but as is typical, in skydiving, when we see each other on a drop zone, it's often in passing. And I have admired you from afar for a very long time because I feel that you, and sometimes this is said as if in a negative, but this is in the most positive connotation, that you are marching to the beat of your own drum in what you want. And we started this interview from the very get-go about living a life by design. And I've watched you do that, and I've admired it. And I've been soaking up this conversation like a sponge because I'm looking for that insight, that edge that gets me closer to living more of a life by design. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope I helped in some way in that conversation. And I look forward very much to where we can see each other in person again.
Thank you, Maxine. An absolute pleasure. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.